My new apartment in the sprawling complex felt less like a home and more like a hermitage. I'd moved here to escape the noise and chaos of my old life, and my plan was simple: work from home, order food delivery, and interact with as few people as possible. My self-imposed isolation was a comfort, a shield against a world I found exhausting. That shield lasted for exactly 1 week. It was on a Tuesday, a cold, miserable day when a flu had settled deep in my bones. I was coughing my lungs out, my head throbbing with a fever. The doorbell rang. I ignored it. It rang again, a short, insistent chime. I opened the door to find my neighbor from across the hall, an old lady with a kind, wrinkled face and a smile that seemed to radiate warmth. "I'm Mrs. Gable," she said, her voice soft and sweet. "I heard you coughing. A nice boy like you shouldn't be so sick all alone." Before I could politely protest, she was in my apartment, holding a small, intricate clay figure in her hands. It was a doll, but a strangely distorted one, with unnaturally long limbs and a tiny, vacant face. It was made of a dark, almost charcoal-colored clay. "Don't you worry," she said, her smile widening. "This will help. This little one will take your pain away." She placed the figure on my windowsill, its blank eyes staring out at the cityscape. "It will absorb your illness. Just let it do its work." I was too sick and too tired to argue. I thanked her, closed the door, and collapsed on my couch. The fever, the aching in my bones, the constant, racking cough, it was all there, a suffocating weight. But as I lay there staring at the ceiling, I felt a strange, cold sensation from the windowsill. The air around the clay figure seemed to grow colder, a small, localized drop in temperature that sent a shiver down my spine. And then, I felt it. The weight on my chest, the throbbing in my head, the ache in my joints, it all began to recede, a slow, gentle pull. Within an hour, I felt fine. Perfectly fine. The fever was gone. The cough was a distant memory. The only lingering trace was a strange, phantom feeling of exhaustion. I stumbled over to the windowsill, my mind a whirl of disbelief. The clay figure was still there, but it wasn't the same. A tiny hairline crack had appeared on its chest, a thin white line against its dark clay body. I picked it up and my breath hitched. The figure was cold, impossibly cold, and it felt heavy, as if it had absorbed not just my illness, but the very density of my sickness. I put it back on the windowsill, my mind racing. It was a coincidence, it had to be. But my eyes kept darting to the figure, and I noticed something else. The blank, vacant face of the doll. It was changing. The tiny, smooth surface seemed to be taking on a new texture, a faint mottled pattern that looked unsettlingly like a human face. My face. The mottled pattern on the clay doll's face wasn't a coincidence. Over the next few days, as my body felt lighter, more energized, the figure changed. A faint indentation appeared where a nose would be. Tiny bumps formed where eyes should be. It was becoming me, a distorted, grotesque effigy in miniature. I tried to throw it away, to hide it in a drawer, but a wave of nausea and unbearable weakness washed over me. It felt like my very essence was being ripped from my body. I stumbled, my knees giving way, and the doll slipped from my hands. I caught it just before it hit the floor, and the weakness vanished. I had a terrible, chilling thought. The doll was a part of me now, and if I harmed it, I would harm myself. The phantom exhaustion from the first day never left. It was a constant, low-grade hum in the back of my mind, a feeling of being a car running on fumes. I started to forget things, simple things. My PIN number, the name of a movie I had just watched, where I had put my keys. My memories felt hazy, as if a thick fog had settled in my mind. The doll, in the meantime, was becoming a perfect copy. I could see the lines of my face in its tiny ceramic features, the furrow of my brow, the curve of my lips. It was me, a cold, porcelain version of my own suffering. The fear drove me to Mrs. Gable's door. I had to know. I had to know what she had done to me. I knocked, a frantic, desperate rhythm. The door opened and she was there, a serene, kind smile on her face. "Hello, dear," she said, her voice as sweet as ever. "Feeling better?" "What did you do to me?" I said, my voice shaking. "What is that thing?" Her smile didn't waver. She just stepped aside, a gentle gesture for me to come in. Her apartment was a museum of strange, unsettling things. The walls were lined with shelves, and on those shelves were hundreds of clay figures. Each one of them was a grotesque, half-formed duplicate of a person. I recognized a few of them. The mailman, the coffee barista from the shop downstairs, the woman who walked her dog every morning. They were all there, a silent ceramic army of her help. My eyes fell on a single figure, a small, malevolent thing with a broken leg. The clay had snapped at the knee. "That's Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice a calm, serene whisper. "He was always so clumsy, falling all the time. He tried to break his doll once. He's in the hospital now with a compound fracture. He'll never walk again." Her smile was now a horrifying, triumphant smirk. "You see, dear, the pain is not gone, it's just transferred. The doll is you and you are the doll." I looked at the figure on my own windowsill. The tiny face, my face, seemed to be smiling back at me, a silent, mocking grin. I had to destroy it. I had to. It was my only way out. But as I watched, the figure on the windowsill lifted its small clay hand, and a small hairline crack appeared on the skin of my own palm, in the exact same spot. She was not just helping people, she was feeding on them. And I was her next meal. My scream was a strangled, desperate sound. The hairline crack on my palm was not a coincidence. It was a direct, horrifying consequence. Mrs. Gable just smiled, a sweet, serene expression on her face that was more terrifying than any snarl. I ran out of her apartment, my mind a frantic haze of panic. Back in my own home, I grabbed the clay doll and looked at its grotesque, miniature version of my face. Its eyes, two tiny, dark bumps, seemed to be staring at me, a cold, mocking gaze. I had to get rid of it. I had to. I ran to the window and threw the doll as hard as I could. It flew through the air and hit the brick wall of the building across from me with a sickening crack. The doll's head shattered into 100 tiny pieces, a small dark cloud of dust rising from the impact. A wave of agonizing pain, a blinding, white-hot fire, shot through my skull. My head throbbed, a crushing, searing pain that made my vision go white. I collapsed to the floor, my hands clutching my head, a raw, animal scream tearing from my throat. When the pain receded, I stumbled to my feet, my legs shaking. I looked in the mirror. A thin, perfectly straight hairline crack ran across my forehead, a spider web of broken skin. A small, dark shard of something was embedded in my skin just above my left eye. The doll's pain was now my pain. Its fate was my fate. I had not destroyed it. I had damaged myself. Over the next few days, my body became a canvas of its own destruction. Every time I looked at the doll, a new crack would appear on its clay body, and a new agonizing pain would appear on mine. I watched in a horrified stupor as a small chip on the doll's arm manifested as a deep, jagged cut on my forearm. The broken clay hand became a numb, useless appendage that dangled at my side. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was a living effigy of my own self, slowly and methodically being consumed by the very thing I had hoped would save me. I tried to get help. I went to the hospital, but the doctors were baffled. The cuts, the numbness, the constant phantom pains, they had no explanation. A young intern with a look of terrified pity in his eyes whispered to me, "It's like your body is just falling apart." I knew the truth. My body wasn't falling apart. It was turning into a doll. My final moments of consciousness were a blur of pain and terror. I was lying in a hospital bed, my body a grotesque, twisted mockery of what it once was. A silent porcelain figure of myself on a bedside table, its face now a perfect, smooth, and terrifying reflection of my own. I looked at the figure. Its eyes, two empty, dark voids, seemed to be staring at me. And I knew, with a certainty that was worse than any doubt, that its consciousness was now my consciousness. The last thing I saw was Mrs. Gable. She was standing at the foot of my bed, a serene, kind smile on her face, a new, perfectly formed, dark clay figure in her hand. She placed it on my bedside table, right next to the one that was now a perfect empty reflection of my own agony. She was a master doll maker, a weaver of pain. Her help was an act of cannibalism, a way to feed on the life force of others. And I was her latest masterpiece. The pain faded, the fear faded. All that was left was a quiet, cold understanding. I was the doll, and I was not alone. There were 100 others, a silent army of porcelain figures in a room across the hall, all of us empty vessels, waiting to be filled with the next person's pain. And as the last vestiges of my mind vanished, I felt a new consciousness take root, a new empty figure in a new empty room. And somewhere, out there, a new neighbor was getting a knock on the door, and a new doll was being placed on a windowsill, and the routine would begin again. I never believed in ghosts. I grew up with science, logic, and rational thinking, but nothing in my life prepared me for the first night in my new apartment. It was a modest place in an old Boston building, the kind of brick structure that looks charming in daylight but carries shadows at night. My unit was on the second floor, small, creaky, and faintly smelling of damp wood. The landlord had mentioned something about the first floor being under renovation, which explained why it was completely dark downstairs. That night, after unpacking, I collapsed into bed. It was past midnight when I heard it. Thud, thud, drag. At first, I thought someone had come home late downstairs. The footsteps were heavy, slow, deliberate, like a man with worn-out boots dragging his legs. They went back and forth beneath me, pacing, scraping, stopping, then starting again. I frowned. Strange, I whispered to myself. The landlord had said no one lived there. I tried to ignore it, pulling the blanket over my head. But the sound didn't stop. In fact, it grew clearer, sharper, until I could tell exactly where the footsteps were, moving from one corner of the downstairs apartment to another. Then at exactly 2:13 a.m., everything stopped. The silence was so thick, it pressed against my ears. My heartbeat pounded, and that's when I heard it. A low, rasping voice, right beneath my bed. "You're above me now." I bolted upright, my breath stuck in my throat. The room was empty, but I swear I heard the wood creak just below where my feet touched the floor. I couldn't move. My whole body stiffened. For the rest of the night, I sat awake, staring at the floorboards, waiting for something, anything to happen. But nothing came, only silence. By morning, I convinced myself I was imagining things. Old buildings creak, wood shifts. My brain was tired, that's all. But deep down, I knew I had heard it. Someone, something was down there. And it knew I was up here. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about the footsteps. When I met my landlord, I casually asked, "So, who lives on the first floor?" He looked at me strangely. "No one. That apartment's been locked for years. Rotten floors, unstable beams. I wouldn't even step inside." A cold shiver ran down my spine. If no one lived there, then who had walked beneath me last night? That evening, I decided to test it. I left my TV on, volume low, and sat quietly. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Nothing. I began to think maybe last night had been a trick of my exhausted mind. But then, at 1:47 a.m., the footsteps started again. Thud, drag, thud. My body froze. The sound traveled from one end of the apartment below to the other. The dragging noise felt almost wet, like flesh scraping against wood. I leaned closer to the floor, pressing my ear to the cold wood. My heart hammered so loud I thought it would burst. And then I heard it. Breathing. A slow, ragged inhale, exhale, right beneath me. Suddenly 3 knocks echoed against the underside of the floorboards. Knock. 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 directly under where I was lying. I scrambled back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. My eyes darted around the room, searching for something, anything that could explain it. That's when I saw movement through the gap beneath my front door. A shadow, 2 feet, bare, standing perfectly still in the hallway. I thought it was a trick of the light until the toes curled upward, unnaturally long and thin, bending back in a way no human foot should bend. The shadow didn't move for several seconds. Then slowly, horrifyingly slowly, it slid away, retreating toward the staircase that led to the first floor. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, but no sound left my throat. The next morning, I asked one of the neighbors across the hall if she had ever heard noises from below. Her face went pale. She hesitated, then whispered, "You should never listen to what's under the floor. Once you acknowledge it, it climbs higher." I laughed nervously, hoping she was joking, but her eyes didn't waver. She leaned closer and said in a trembling voice, "The man who used to live in your apartment, he jumped to his death from the roof. But before he died, he told everyone something lived beneath the floorboards, something that followed him. No one believed him. Until they found his body twisted in ways a fall couldn't explain." Her words stuck in my head all day. By evening, I was already on edge. But nothing prepared me for what I saw that night. At 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of wood cracking, not beneath me this time, above me. I looked up, and in the faint moonlight seeping through the curtains, I saw it, fingers impossibly long pushing through the ceiling plaster, curling downward into my room. The moment I saw those fingers pushing through the ceiling, I couldn't breathe. They weren't human, too thin, too long, bending backward as if boneless. Dust rained down as they curled, clawing the air like they were searching for me. I stumbled back, grabbing my phone, but the screen stayed black. Dead. No power. No signal. And then, silence. The fingers stopped moving. They froze, dangling, as if waiting. I held my breath. My entire body shook. Then slowly, agonizingly slow, they retracted into the ceiling, leaving behind deep cracks. But just as relief washed over me, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. From the hallway, the sound of bare feet approaching my door. I crept closer, my heart slamming in my chest. Shadows shifted beneath the doorframe. Someone was standing there. Then, a whisper, so faint I thought it came from inside my skull. "I'm here. Now." I backed away, pressing myself against the far wall. The door handle twitched once, twice, then began to turn. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked. The door creaked open an inch, and through that gap, an eye stared at me. Not human. Milky white, too large for its socket, veins writhing like worms across the surface. I collapsed to the floor, trembling. The door opened wider. The hallway was empty, yet the footsteps came closer, inside my apartment now. Thud, drag, thud. It was in the room with me. The smell hit me next. Rot. Wet wood and something metallic, like blood. My vision blurred as the shadow moved across the walls, bending, stretching, too tall to be human. I whispered to myself, "Wake up, please. Wake up." But then the floorboards beneath me groaned, and a voice rose from below, echoing inside the wood. "I've climbed. Higher." The ground split open. Long, gray hands burst upward, clawing out from the floor itself. One grabbed my ankle with impossible strength. I screamed and kicked, but it pulled me down. Splinters tore through my skin as the floor swallowed me. I glimpsed, just for a moment, its face emerging through the cracks, jaw unhinged too wide, teeth black and rotting, eyes glowing faintly like dying embers. The last thing I remember was falling into the darkness beneath the floor, the sound of my own screams muffled by wood closing above me. No one saw me again, but sometimes late at night the neighbors swear they hear footsteps coming from the second floor. Moving into the cramped Los Angeles apartment felt like the first breath after holding it for too long. I was tired of fleeting connections, the digital echo chamber, the gnawing loneliness that seemed to follow me like a persistent shadow. Maybe a change of scenery, a fresh start, was all I needed. My next-door neighbor, Maya, was a vision that seemed plucked right out of a dream. Her smile was like sunlight breaking through clouds, and her eyes held a depth that hinted at untold stories. We bonded over shared walls and the universal struggle of lukewarm coffee, and soon, tentative conversations blossomed into easy companionship. There was a delicate, almost ethereal quality about Maya. She rarely left her apartment, claiming she preferred the quiet solitude for her art, intricate, otherworldly sketches that she showed me with a shy smile. Our connection deepened quickly. Late-night talks on the fire escape, shared takeout under the soft glow of the city lights. Each moment felt charged with a nascent romance I hadn't felt in years. I found myself drawn to her enigmatic aura, the gentle sadness that sometimes flickered in her eyes, the way her laughter could chase away the darkest corners of my mind. But as our intimacy grew, a subtle unease began to creep into my perception. After our most tender moments, a lingering hug, a soft kiss on the forehead, even just holding hands, I would feel inexplicably drained. A profound fatigue would settle over me, a bone-deep weariness that no amount of sleep could alleviate. It was as if an invisible weight had been placed upon my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. Headaches would throb behind my eyes, and a persistent low-grade nausea would churn in my stomach. I initially dismissed it as stress, the byproduct of new beginnings and the rush of unexpected affection. But the pattern became undeniable. The deeper our connection, the weaker I felt. Maya, on the other hand, seemed to bloom in my presence. Her skin would take on a radiant glow, her eyes would sparkle with an almost unnatural intensity, and her laughter would ring with a vibrant energy that seemed to fill the entire apartment complex. One evening, after a particularly heartfelt conversation on her doorstep, I felt the familiar wave of exhaustion wash over me. As I leaned against the doorframe, a strange detail caught my eye. A faint, almost translucent vine, glowing with a soft internal luminescence, seemed to be twining around her wrist, disappearing beneath the cuff of her sweater. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the dim hallway light. When I looked again, it was gone. The incident left me deeply unsettled. I tried to rationalize it, exhaustion playing tricks on my eyes, a stray thread catching the light. But a nagging doubt had taken root, a seed of fear whispering in the back of my mind. There was something about Maya, something beneath the surface of her captivating charm, that I couldn't quite grasp. And the closer I got, the more I felt like I was slowly fading away. The exhaustion became a permanent resident in my life. The headaches were a dull, persistent throb. The world around me felt muted, as if the colors had been drained from my vision. But Maya was more vibrant than ever. Her skin had a luminous glow, her movements were charged with a boundless energy, and her laughter filled my ears like a symphony. I had lost myself, but she had found herself. I knew, with a horrifying certainty, that I was not her partner. I was her sustenance. I couldn't bring myself to confront her. The loneliness had been my greatest fear, and Maya was the only person who had ever chased it away. I was terrified that if I pulled away, if I broke our connection, I would be alone again. So I continued, a willing victim in a beautiful lie. But the guilt, the fear, the desperation, it was a feast for the glowing vine that was now a permanent part of my vision. I saw it every time I looked at her, a faint pulsing light that seemed to be growing. It was no longer a flicker. It was a faint green pulse, visible under the thin fabric of her clothes. One night, after a quiet evening of talking, she turned to me with her captivating smile. Her eyes, filled with a beautiful, intoxicating warmth, seemed to be looking into my very soul. "You're so empty," she said, her voice a soft, hypnotic whisper. "So much emptiness. It's so beautiful." My blood ran cold. She wasn't talking about my personality. She was talking about my life force. I stood up, my body trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. "What are you doing to me?" I whispered, my voice thick with terror. "What is that thing?" Her smile didn't waver. "It's not a thing," she said, and as she spoke, the glowing vine on her body pulsed with a faint, malevolent light. "It's me." I watched in horror as her skin began to shift, a translucent, almost ethereal quality appearing on her face. Her beautiful facade was melting away, revealing the horrifying truth beneath. Her eyes, once filled with warmth, were now two dark, empty pits. Her skin, once so vibrant, was now a pale, translucent film, and beneath it, I could see the glowing, pulsating body of the parasitic vine, its tendrils twisting and writhing, a parasitic puppet master. She was not a person. She was a vessel. And her love was a lie, a ritual to harvest my life force. My mind reeled. This wasn't a romance. It was a horrifying, intimate act of cannibalism. The deeper our love, the more of me she would consume. I had to get away. I had to run. But as I turned to flee, a tendril, a single glowing line of light, shot out from her body and wrapped itself around my ankle. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, a suffocating weight that felt like an unbreakable trap. "Don't go," she whispered, her voice no longer a sweet melody but a dry, rattling hiss. "I need you. I need you to stay." I was not just a victim. I was a captive. And the love that I had so desperately sought was the very thing that was going to kill me. I screamed, a strangled sound that barely made it past my lips. The glowing vine, a perfect, malevolent imitation of life, had a grip on my ankle that was impossibly strong. The air in the room was thick with a cloying, sickly sweet scent, like decaying flowers. The illusion of Maya, my beautiful, enigmatic neighbor, was fading before my eyes. Her skin was turning translucent, her eyes were becoming two dark, empty pits, and the vibrant glow that I had so loved was now a cold, eerie luminescence that pulsed with a life of its own. "Please," I begged, my voice a broken whisper. "Let me go." The creature, no longer a person but a pulsating, glowing thing of pure malice, shook its head. "I can't," it rasped, a dry, rattling hiss that was not her voice but an imitation of it. "You're a part of me now. Your love. It's so sweet. I've never tasted anything like it." I felt a surge of cold terror, a wave of sickening understanding that washed over me like a tidal wave. The love, the intimacy, the connection. It was a ritual. I was not her partner. I was her meal. She had fed on my loneliness, my longing, my desperate need for human connection. And now she was going to consume me, body and soul. The glowing tendrils of the vine, now visible and writhing, began to climb my leg. I screamed, trying to tear them away, but they were impossibly strong. They wrapped around my torso, my arms, my throat, a parasitic embrace that was slowly squeezing the life out of me. As they climbed, I felt my body wither, my skin grow taut and dry, my life force being siphoned away, a slow, agonizing drain of my very being. I looked at Maya's face, a distorted, half-formed imitation of the woman I had loved. A single, glowing tear, a tear of pure, luminous light, rolled down her cheek. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice now a chorus of 1,000 different voices, all whispering the same word. "Sorry." My mind began to fade. My memories, my hopes, my fears, they were all being consumed by the glowing vine, a feast for a monstrous creature from another dimension. I saw flashes of my life, my childhood home, my parents' faces, my first kiss. All of it, all of my existence was being absorbed, a beautiful, tragic tapestry of a life that was ending. And then, there was nothing. The pain faded. The fear faded. All that was left was a quiet, cold, unending darkness. I was a part of her now. I was a part of the vine. I was the luminous glow in her skin, the sparkle in her eyes, the life in her laughter. I was a ghost, a living memory trapped in a beautiful, horrifying shell. The creature, my captor, my love, was now more vibrant and beautiful than ever. It was the perfect illusion, a beautiful mirage, a living lie. The last thing I saw was a young, lonely man, a new neighbor, knocking on her door. And Maya, now more beautiful and radiant than ever, opened the door, a sweet, inviting smile on her face. And I knew, with a terrible, chilling certainty, that the cycle would begin again.